I'll have it up, and then whenever I am officially started, I can just cut to it. I'm gonna edit this down to some form.
Okay.
So this was
Jump rope might seem to be a
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Hines, and welcome to Youth for Pride. Youth for Pride is an organization run by the future generation dedicated to lifting LGBTQ voices and making a world that's accepting for all. Today, I'm joined by Derrick Halloway. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and your knowledge about the LGBTQ community?
Cool. My name is Derrick Halloway. I am the program director of employment and college for the Hedrick Martin Institute. I am a 45-year-old gay Black man.
Yeah, would you like to tell us about a little bit what you do at your institute?
Sure. So at HMI, I have the wonderful opportunity to supervise 3 amazing people where we really create and make programs where we are helping and uplifting the LGBTQIA community, giving them the foundations for employment and education, training them for what they should and or might deal with in the workforce, as well as what they might encounter in the college setting. And beyond that, just really, I call it really planting seeds of encouragement and young POCs based off of their sexuality and also not based off of their sexuality, so that they can take the mantle and pass the torch to the next generation.
All great things. So the reason I brought you in here is because I had a little discussion or back and forth about things I've been learning about LGBTQ community and what's been going on recently.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing of this interview is how progress in society viewing the LGBTQ community and how their rights and they're being lifted versus government and how policies have been passed around that may try to lift them and also try to bring them down. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So my main 2 terms I want to use were progress versus stagnation, which will make a little bit more sense when we get into all the laws and stuff. But I want to ask you, as someone more keen on these issues, who has maybe viewed them more in depth and had more time to look at them and more deeply, how would you say America in the last decade have they made great progress toward LGBTQ acceptance, or have they fallen back and things just kind of been the same way for a while?
I think that's a double-edged sword question. I think for one part of the community, the ability to get married, a lot more integration within corporate America, the sponsorship sometimes with Pride is sometimes a beautiful thing, and also it can be a little bit overwhelming. I think we as a community, as the LGBTQIA community, we have advanced a lot in the past decade. I think we're going to advance again in the coming decade. But I do believe that each time that we do make a step, there is pieces of our society that doesn't necessarily step with us. Sure. You are sometimes met with negative connotations. Sometimes you're met with, I believe a rapper as of late made a really ignorant and egregious statement. So I think there is always more work to be done in the community. I think it stretches beyond what we can just do in our own enclaves of the LGBTQI community. So it does take a larger piece. So I've been watching, I pay attention to what's going on in social media. So yeah, I think that we're making strides, but I think there's always going to be the opportunities to educate.
For sure. I mean, I guess a lot of activists, when they look at things they want to happen, they have a whole bucket list of things that should be done or should have already been done. And if you look after a period of time, a whole thing is like gradual change, like small change over time. And so you see these little events that get done and you're like, this is good progress and we're doing good work. But then you look back and it's like you have like your large list and it feels like these things aren't getting done. So it's like that's what I'm trying to say. Like in some extent, like there's great progress being done, but at the same time, we still have these nagging issues that feel
We
like could be
do.
holding up. Yeah.
I mean, and we can look at it from a perspective of just being LGBTQ, or we can look at it from a perspective of people of color just trying to continue to have the right to vote. The Voting Right Act that happened in the 60s, well, it's 2020 and we're still trying to defend and keep polls open and fair for people to vote. So progress happens. It just doesn't happen as quickly as we would like it to happen. It doesn't happen as fast as our society is moving. And any fight, any need or requirement for justice is an ongoing struggle. So
Yeah.
we've got to prepare for that. So you take some of those goods and some of those bads and you work with what you got. And some you hand on to the next generation, and some are victories that you get to obtain.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up the voting rights. I literally just got a few ads back to back of Stacey Abrams and like the voter suppression laws going on in certain states. So I was gonna say like that was very like right now. I almost half lost my train of thought here. Yeah, but like just trying to say like when you look at like society, I'm on social media a lot, and with some of the groups I'm in, a lot of them are LGBTQ, and I get a lot of the like in not in it's not infighting, but like in discussions about like what should go on in between their communities and like what is right and like how they see certain issues should be addressed and whatnot. And as someone who's just following them and trying to make decisions myself as someone who's cisgender, heterosexual, and white and male, it's just trying to look back and think like see the perspectives and just trying to like come to a correct decision. I feel like those decisions just come instantly. Like I see it on my feed. I like take a minute to like look at it, and it's just like this is how I view this now. But in many respects, it's less that there's when you're comparing Twitter to government, a government has a bit less agility, I would say. So making those issues change is a whole different situation.
And it happens with the people. And you alluded to something earlier of like infighting within our own community, and that does happen. I personally feel that within the LGBTQ community, the letter T for transgender rights is something that we don't actually put as the forefront. And unfortunately, you see a lot of misgendering of folk, a lot of ignorance around the trans community and the gender non-conforming community. So we really do have some internal issues, but I think you can find that within every spectrum. If it's a all white male spectrum, you can sit there and find pieces where some people will agree in one aspect and not agree on the other. Same thing within the African American community, same thing within the Latino community. So yeah.
I mean, like it's a whole thing. Like
it is.
Like you bring it up, like for example, you have people in the trans community or maybe in other parts of the LGBT community who are like not to say angry, but like frustrated that their representations of who are leaders of the LGBT community continue to be gay white men who are relatively older and don't represent the vast spectrum of people that are covered under the LGBTQ community. Yeah. So and stuff like that. Also like things with like I just had an issue on Twitter. There's a large story I won't get into, but apparently someone got outed for some very bad crimes. But they underwent a transition, but because of the crimes, people still wanted to like misgender them. And so it became less of an issue. They're like, oh, but if you do these heinous things, you don't deserve to be called correctly. And I'm like, and people were saying that's not a reflection of getting angry at that person, that's a reflection of the trans community and you not respecting the trans community, not just that one person. So it's just those little issues like that that seem trivial, but at the same time are just like so.
They're
I don't
massive.
know. Exactly.
They're massive issues. And I'm not a member of the trans community, but I am a huge supporter of my trans sisters and brothers. There's an old saying in the African American community that you look out for the smallest or the you look out for all parts of your community, but that area that needs the most work, that's where you put the most energy into. And I've been doing that for as long as I can remember as a queer Black man. It's been a focus.
Yeah, I've always had like the interpretation of like the things of it came a lot down. This was like a, not to say a similar talking point when it was Black Lives Matter and people who try to promote all lives. It was the whole thing of we lift all voices, but the ones that are in need most help are the ones we focus on now, sort of thing.
Mhm.
That's like if you see a rampage and the amount of transphobia, you focus on trans issues. If you see biphobia in a community, you focus on that. It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
That is important. I want to cut back a little bit because I brought up governmental issues. Now, a big thing that might be going overlooked right now is the amount of anti-LGBTQ laws just that are passed within states this year. So I had an article, I'm pretty sure, but 2021 is officially, in terms of state laws, and at least the 21st century has been one of, I think, the worst year for like individual state laws getting passed against the LGBT community that are blatant human rights violations. If I could pull it up right now, I don't remember the exact number, but the one I had was around 15 or 18. But I think it was increasing, and there was way more that would have been introduced, and that maybe were just in the last stages of not getting vetoed. So really,
we have to look at the states in which these things are being passed in as well. I hate to make it a Republican or Democratic type thing. But most of these laws are being passed in more red states and more Republican-based states, and less within the Democratic states, blue states. I think it's also about exposure. In New York City, you will have a larger population of LGBTQIA out people than you might have in the state of, I don't know, Alabama.
Or Arkansas or something like that.
Arkansas or something like that. So that's one of those pieces, but I think that's something collectively that the community has been paying attention to. It's, when you roll back one group, you tend to roll back a few others. So as the African-American community, Latino, the Latinx community is kind of being pushed back in voting pieces, you're going to see some of this also affect the LGBTQIA community as well.
For sure. But like you bring up the states, like we say like Republican states, like mostly Midwest or South, be they wherever. But like I had a whole point when it may have been around the voting season, like in 2020, where they talked about how if you don't push blame it on the South or blame it on Midwest. And this is a different situation, obviously, where it's more the officials that are in the Midwest. This is 100% out of the people's control at that point. This is not like a voting situation, but like there is still major groups, maybe not in the same vein as New York City or like, let's say Chicago or whatever, like that work like yours to maybe uplift voices and stuff like that. But they're still out there and they're still fighting. But when it comes to those states, they're vastly outnumbered.
I wouldn't say vastly outnumbered. I think in our current situation, there's a lot of things that is going on. COVID is obviously at the forefront. I think we have a racial reckoning that's happening within this country. And within that racial reckoning, we're also having an identity crisis of what it is to be an American.
Yeah.
So I feel that also affects part of the LGBTQ community as well. I keep dropping off the IA, but
Yeah.
there, it affects it as well. States actually have been making it difficult for, in particular, trans people for bathroom usage. I grew up in a household where men and females use the same bathroom constantly. So I don't quite get it, but I don't understand. But the premise of fear is or has been what has been shaping these policies. So unfortunately, we still have the shaping of such policies. You will see that again, primarily in states where you don't have a higher population of out LGBTQ folk and or a large voting bloc. You also have a few issues around within that Sun Belt of some Christianity pieces that are mixed in with religion, and also that is Christianity pieces that's also mixed in with politics that also has some ripple effects. So you see that across the board.
That's why I want to bring up. I wanted to link the article and pull it up so I can list it off right now. It's from the Human Rights Campaign, and they were listing them off about the states the laws are passed, their like, specifics, and the states they're in. So the ones I have so far, it said 17. When this was published, May 7th. So it could be more. So they had a lot of these were focused on trans and then specific issues. And what you'll notice is a lot of these are reactionary, but when we'll go down the list. So 7 of these are anti-trans sport bans. These are in Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Montana, and West Virginia. 4 are religious refusals of Arkansas, Montana, and South Dakota. I guess there's not an extra one in there. 2 anti-LGBTQ education, which I think is more, I'm guessing is more like required to teach about the community than accepting teaching those who are out, I'm guessing. But those are
the premise of that is really to just educate people that American history is gay history as well. We have made many major strides, and there has been many prominent people of the LGBTQ community. And even though we've made these strides and we've continued to make progress, I think one of the big pieces that we do see is questioning if somebody was born one particular way and do they have a particular strength level. And this is under the sports aspect. I think you see that also within the community, well, even not outside of the community, but when people are talking about critical race theory, and instead of them having an understanding that critical race theory is not something that's taught within schools, but it's something that I would say philosophers, theorists, lawyers kind of look at and dissect racial issues, and what are some of the pieces that prevent people of color from advancing. You still have these same issues that are like reoccurring within our community. So the aspects of like gender equality, or trans young people in sports. Again, I think what people don't know is what is part of their downfall. So it's about the educating of folk. If a young person plays sports and if they feel that they're in the wrong body, who am I or who is anybody else to tell them that they cannot transition and that they cannot play that sport any further? So I think the LGBTQ community, I like to say, we're about 20 to 30 years ahead of the straight community.
In terms of like,
and we've been just trying to bring y'all along for a really long period of time.
Yeah, but like from my perspective, it feels like it could be like every year where it's like a different flavor of just issues like they want to point at for like trans community, and like this year, just because of I guess Olympics and it's just coming up, it was sports. Then they had like the bathroom debate, which is big in like 17, 16, and then you have just general issues with medical care that come up, and it's like it's just general like talking points, and like every single time, like every time in the year, I'll get like the think piece about it or like the well researched video essay that's like, and most of the times it's like debunking why they're like, if they say it's unfair, or like they'll give like statistics of like why this is not a like real issue, and they'll even say at the end it's all capped by like, even at the end of the day you're just denying human rights. And so like I think, I don't even know what, like if it'd be like, let it be sports, it's like, oh, like if you want to talk about like physical advantages or whatever, it's like you could like list things where like this really isn't a big an issue for the states to be banning it at this rate, but in terms of anything else, which is telling. But and then even at the end of the day, you could just wrap it up by saying it's just straight up a violation of human rights.
Yeah.
So that was just my kind of spiel about like the laws versus like society, as maybe LGBTQ community, as someone who wants to be an ally, tries to be as good of an ally as possible, and is very much in circles who are LGBTQ. But like those groups have a larger understanding of how like society should be, like people in their community should be treated and stuff like that, versus the government, where it's like you have to have like a whole different perspective of everything and like just shift to like how would they process a situation. It's also like if you get deeper into like side politics, where it's like you want all these things for like one side, but then you just have to come down to, oh, they're still debating about basic healthcare, and like you're thinking about so many other things. It's like stuff like that is how I see it. So I guess I'll go past some of like the government aspects. I just want to talk about maybe just some like activism and like how society could maybe fight against those governments, or like show that they have progress and that the government should as well. And so because we are the Youth for Pride, we are younger and we want to like show that, whereas more people, the younger people are like showing that they're more accepting generally. We want to say like, my question was, what do you think like the youth who are most accepting groups should do in order to do that, like in order to like show that times are changing?
You guys are a voting bloc, and in order for times to change is for you to get to the point and for it to become a habit for you to vote, and to vote not just for the president, not just for the mayor, or not just for the governor, but even some of the smaller positions that are within government, right? The city council is an important piece. Your DAs are important. As the next generation, you guys can vote and make sure that people like Mitch McConnell does never see the inside of Washington, D.C. Because there's a baby one out there. There's a baby Mitch McConnell. There's a baby Donald Trump. You guys are a voting bloc, and you have to also remember that you guys are powerful. So never give up your power. And also know that within your power, it's voting, it's taxes, it's say. You have the power of telling people where you stand or how you feel. And also by selecting people to run in particular positions. So encouraging trans women of color to run for office, encouraging bisexual women to discuss their bisexuality. It's about, you have to bring it to the forefront. You have to bring things to the forefront. I believe when we are talking about the young folk, you guys have all that power. You guys are so much more advanced than my generation, where I didn't feel comfortable coming out until my 20s. Where now I'm working with young people that are coming out at 12 and 13, which is so liberating. So there are certain things that my generation has done that offered for your generation comfort. And for allies, really it is about aligning yourself with somebody politically that is not just going to represent some of the things that you think are best, but for the overall community that you live in. So my advice to young people is get politically active. your voice and your say is important. It opens up doors and it changes how we do business.
Yeah. I mean, you brought this up with like, not to say like making candidates, but I remember a lot of things like in your area, or at least sometimes it's like, especially with the presidential this year, it's like you are just grasping at what like things you agree with, and like it's almost like a mix and match at some extents,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like this candidate feels like with this, and this candidate agrees with this but doesn't agree with this, and it's like I feel like with the newer generation, it feels like those things should become a standard for like candidates in a way, where it's like if those aren't going to be some like if those candidates are not stepping up, we have to like make those voices become leaders in a way. Like I know it's
You don't
sometimes stagnant.
you don't have to make them. You just have
Yeah,
to create a lane for them.
exactly.
You have to create. As somebody that for a while had political aspirations, not any further. But but for somebody that did, it's just about creating a lane. It's about opening those doors. It's about sometimes just seeing that first person to say that I can do that. So I remember when I was younger, watching David Dinkins when was the first Black mayor of New York. That was like, oh my God, I can do that. That man looks like me. The same thing for Obama. The same thing for Pete Buttigieg, which when he ran, there were some queer kids that was like, he looks like me. He sounds like me. He has some of the same experiences I've had. So I think sometimes the best representation is being able to see it. So carving out those spaces, carving out those lanes are important. And
Yeah,
encouraging people.
yeah. I guess like maybe to some people like the milestone of seeing like a gay person running for president or
Mhm.
seeing someone take office who's a person of color, like I guess some like I know my generation, it doesn't really dawn on them. Like it always like comes with some of our self-deprecation in a way where it's like, yeah, like we could do this, but like we look at like the current political state and we're like, at the same time we agree everyone can do it, but at the same time no one's stepping up. Like it feels like there is a wide open lane, at the same time no lane.
I think a lot of it is that we haven't educated you guys enough about your civic duties also. You know, that goes into another rabbit hole of educating young people. But I think you guys haven't been really pushed in understanding that you have a civic responsibility. And that civic responsibility is voting. That civic responsibility is making sure that what this country says it stands for, it actually stands for. And when it's not standing for it, for us to step in and for us to help kind of change and shift that a little bit. So again, for those that have that void that you guys aren't showing up quite yet, you also got to give it time. You
Yeah.
also got to give it time. And I also think sometimes certain situations make people run, make people actually decide to go and say, you know, enough is enough. So while right now there's a gap in between you guys' abilities to like think about, oh, I can run for this office. You know, who knows? Maybe somebody that is in one of your groups might actually take the leap and say, you know what, I can do it. So let me get over the fear factor of doing it and just, you know, do what Nike says and just do it. So just showing up, I think that's part of the piece. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'm trying to fully grasp where I was going with this. No, you actually answered my question. I was getting ready to say the next one that I thought was like a follow up, but it wasn't.
It's okay.
Yeah. So my next question was, I brought up the laws that felt like they felt stagnant in a way, where like these have been issues that have been non-issues in the community for many years now, and it's just like hitting the government of discussing them. Like, is that something we have to expect, or could we expect like stability of like, okay, this is a non-issue, these should be reversed, or like should we expect like larger government intervention of, yeah, these trans laws against sports or trans laws against medical care, that's a clear no-go, and it's like immediately put the foot down.
Again, it depends on who's in power. You know, there was a lot of positive laws that were put under that was done under the Obama administration as it related to the LGBTQ community. Unfortunately, when the next president came in, that was not in that same party, shifted and changed all those laws and opened up a new floodgate. So again, it's always going back to being how active you are. How active you are as a member in the community, how active you are going to be in all parts of this. So there's always going to be challenges, right? There's always going to be challenges to rights. Earlier, I gave the example for civil rights. I can also give an example for women's rights and the question of Roe versus Wade being overturned. Some of these things we think are set in stone, and others we are finding out people will try to find a way to change these things. So in order for it to like kind of stay, it's again about the political power, the political stay, making sure you are active, making sure that you guys are not sitting on the sidelines and waiting for my generation to put political people in, but your generation to start doing that. And we're seeing that with like AOC. Who's a younger member of, I believe, the House of Representatives. I could be wrong.
I think she's representative. She's in the Senate. Yeah.
I think she's in the House. But her movement, her passion, that should be able to ignite anybody. And her story. She was a waitress. So this was not necessarily part of her goal. But you know, enough is enough. So sometimes it's just about who was going to step up and when and how.
Yeah. I guess what I was trying to say is, hold on a minute. But like, I guess like what I was trying to say is like, I guess in a lot of countries when I'm noticing like, not to say political, but like laws get passed that are major for human rights, it feels like, all right. It feels like a natural timeline where it's like, okay, this happened and we're done. And it's sometimes get taught in the US like that's how it is. Where it's like from this point forward, civil rights for black Americans is no longer an issue. From this point, it's no longer an issue for women's rights. From this point on, it's no longer an issue. It's like, and you see, not only is there more fights that have to go on, and only like sometimes the basics are getting done at those points, and we're calling like wiping our hands clean, like that's it. Even then, like we're trying to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's something that we thought was like over and done with. Was it 50 years ago? 60 years ago? Was it 60s? I'm gonna guess.
I'm not exactly sure. I could probably ask Google.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's been over and done with for decades. Like, okay, this is an issue we don't have to worry about, and like this feels like in other countries. Like, hey, we're past like anti-abortion laws. We're past voting laws for people of color. We're past this. But in America, it feels like, okay, we're gonna maybe go back on this. Now these people want to go back on this, but we want to push forward this, and then it's almost like there's always so many other fights that you feel like are over, but they never really end.
I think that just kind of goes back to America's identity issue. America's identity issue is something that I've known for a while, that come around 2050, America's not going to be an all-white country anymore. It's going to be predominantly brown. This is something that I remember learning in 7th grade. So if I can remember learning this in the 80s, that means that other people had seen these trends. So I'm going to go back to the earlier part, and it's nothing is ever set in stone. So there's always going to be a consistent fight for those that are oppressed. The oppressed will always fight, because that just because something is written doesn't mean, or that a law was passed, doesn't mean that there's not going to be different ways of going around it, or to make things more difficult, or passing other amendments that's connected to it. So, you know, This is one of those things that nothing is set in stone, especially in our political system. But it's stuff that, again, it goes back to empowering the next generation, because the generation before me opened up floodgates and we're still fighting for them. The name has changed, but it's still civil rights. We call it Black Lives Matter, but it's still really similar to, and on the same premise of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I would tell you, gear up and get ready for a fight, because in order for this country to truly be equitable, we would have to burn the bad boy down and start all over. Nobody wants to do that. We shouldn't do that. But there is different ways in which we can make this place a little bit more equitable. And again, that goes back to the ballot box. Again, that's being diligent. And that's always keeping your eye focused on your own particular rights that you want to secure, and those around, and for people around you.
Yeah. I guess this is one of my final questions here is,
okay.
I guess this is going to go back to how you said with voting. So, like, I guess when you're saying the identity crisis that we're having right now, I feel like a lot of people are getting, like, the divide between not just media and the government, but versus, like, you have, like, social media versus major outlets versus the government versus communities made by people who are just trying to decipher everything. And so I feel like all four or five of those groups have maybe one shared idea, like one shared thought of what America is, or maybe not, or like this one shares some things with this one that shares some things with this one, and it's like, I don't know, it's maybe we're in a place where it's like very unclear where the resolution may be, but like, what do you think? Like, I guess maybe you touched on this like a bit earlier, but where do you see like that end coming? Where, like,
could you restate your question again?
I'm trying. It's just kind of rambly, but like,
right.
If we're saying like between people who are trying to figure out America's identity, like what they believe in America, versus how bigger, like maybe corporations or the media or the government is deciding of where America is going, like where do you see like that coming to a head, where America is like having to understand where the public feels like America is versus the government is?
I don't know if the two will ever meet. You know, governments are made to provide structure. The people are asked to fit into particular structures. But every square peg doesn't, I don't know if the two will ever necessarily meet. I think they will get close. Not, the beautiful part about humans is that we all think different and we all have our different foundations. It's just how can we hold our values together, our personal values, but also not hamper everybody else's values that might differ from yours. I think the first step is just for us to understand that we're constantly evolving. Humans are constantly evolving. Laws are going to constantly evolve, and we've just got to keep on trend for that evolution. We've got to stay focused on that. I'm going to give you an example. We're just now passing an infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
We have bridges that are older than me. No, I'm pretty old. No, I'm not. But you have bridges that are older than me. You've had horrible roads for decades. We kept pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. Or what I would say is kicking the can down the road. But now we can't kick the can down the road any further because everything is crumbling. So now we're moving. Politically, the other side, and I don't want to really say Republican and Democrat because I think that's a little, I think that gets a little too mushy. Well, not mushy, but a little too messy.
Yeah.
But there is political pieces where there's a reason why the Northeast is very liberal. It's because we are mixed and we have so many different cultures, and we are forced to work with so many different cultures, but in certain areas, you don't have that mixture. You don't have that exposure. So somewhere like South Dakota is not going to have a large population of gay Black men, you
Yeah.
know? So they don't necessarily will understand my story and could even appreciate my story. So, I mean, we have issues, we have problems, we have dramas, we have dilemmas. It's about how we solve them. It's about understanding that it takes time. It's an understanding that if we are still fighting for women's rights, if we're still voting, if we're still looking for voting rights,
Yeah.
then that says a lot about our
Yeah.
country. It says a lot about us. So I think our policies need to catch up to where the rest of the country is at, but the country is so divided.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a constant educating moment. Consistently educating young people, consistently educating older people about the plights of different organizations and different people. And I think as a country, we'll be great when we have the ability to look at, like, where is our bottom?
Yeah.
What population is the population that's most hurt? And let's work our way that way.
Yeah.
When we do that, then you can probably see, okay, indigenous women, indigenous trans women, that is the bottom of our barrel where we have, they have so many of the strikes against them.
Yeah.
So I think once we start working from the bottom up, instead of it being from the top down, we'll
Yeah.
see some different results. So yeah.
I also want to say, like, you brought up, like, the divide right now. I feel like what's really important, especially because I want to tie this back to people my age, is how influential and, like, how important it is to influence the people of my generation to, like, see the better sides of this right now. Because as these things are starting to, like, fade away, and, like, not to be morbid, but, like, fade away, like, some people on the other side are starting to fade away, and that influence is starting to wear off. It's very important that the other, like, our side, where we want to, like, uplift those voices and get those things moving, that they're on our side so that the tides can change, and it's not them just filling in the gaps of people who are leaving.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to you guys. I can preach 1,000 times about what I feel this country needs to do or how to help the LGBTQIA community. Yes, I have my hands deeply embedded in it. But it really comes from allies. It really comes from other people making a push. It really comes to normalizing the fact that we have a gay community within our community, within the American community. Within this American community, you have Black and brown people. Within this community, you have indigenous people. We have to learn how to work together. There is oh God, I'm always old when I'm able to give like these little prophetic pieces, but like the difference between heaven and hell is that everyone in heaven has been given this stick, and the goal is to be able to feed the next person. And if everybody is feeding the next person and educating the next person, nobody goes hungry. Right now we're living in hell because everybody's mindset is that I got to get mine and mine only, which leaves a void for other people, which leaves a void for the larger society. Yeah. So again, what I can continue to tell you guys is allies, young people, if you see, I can go back to now. If you see something, say something. If you see that this is something that's wrong, say something. If you see a queer person being bullied, say something. If you see injustice around people of color, queer people, anybody that does not kind of quote unquote fit a norm, say something. So that way it becomes something constantly. So your ability to voice your opinion is one thing, but your ability to also help educate other people is another. So try to find and keep that balance if it's possible.
Yeah, I guess my big thing was that I'm gonna speak kind of from my perspective here. I come from Staten Island, which is I live in New York City, so I get all of the influence of New York City, but it's still repelled through a more conservative lens. And I'm white. I live in South Staten Island. I get a lot of that. I get probably the most of that in like all of New York City's main boroughs. And so I guess it's important, like, not to say like people in my area they would be like red or apolitical. We'll go with that. It's important that maybe the future generation, like I know the kids of those people who have those parents, and it's like they want to be the people who are like actually speaking out. And I feel like that's like the real tide change. Whereas like if you look back, like through generations, it's like, oh, this person was conservative, and this person was like independent, and they were mixed in the middle. Like they wanted to like believe in these newer things, but they were still kind of stuck in their ways. I feel like this generation is the one where it's like, no, we're fully out of that, and we're fully like going forward, which is great to see. But I feel like I still see those people, because from where I'm from, that start stuck in that way, and I want it to not be that way.
But see, you already are not being that. You are the change. So when you can realize, when you can look around, right, in your circle and realize everybody else feels this way, but I don't feel that way. And I feel blah, 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 blah. If you hold on to those feelings, those things will grow. You will have different exposure. It might go against the grain of your community. It might go against the grain of your family. But it doesn't mean that there isn't power. By you being a white male from Staten Island, right, you have and yield a great deal of power. If you utilize that power to hope, to provide hope and to help those that are lesser than you, then the doors will open, and other people will see that. You are part of that change. I know I always speak on a very POC, a person of color aspect, but some of our greatest allies for equality has been the exact opposite of people of color. It has come from radical white males that was like, I don't agree with that. So you are a smaller microcosm of the next generation, that it gives me hope. It gives me comfort. It gives me the ability to say, whew, I did something right. And that I can pass this torch on to somebody that might not even be a part of the LGBTQ community, but has an understanding of it and might yield some more power to open up more doors. Yeah. So yes, you are very, very powerful. I want you to know that. And how you yield that power is going to be really the shaping of who you are going to be as a human.
Yeah. I think it's very important you brought up like how, I guess, like when you brought up like even in like the most radical spaces, they end like you still have people who could be traditionally like seen, like if you just categorize them as the most general, like straight white male, then they are the ones who speak out. Like I think it's important, like what our newer generation is starting to like realize is, yes, we have those voices and they stand for more what they believe than the person. Is what I'm trying to say. Is it's something I've been noticing where it's like, yeah, I 100% like the idea of someone who's 100% wants to be pro-trans rights, pro-LGBTQ plus rights, make sure there's no issues with voting rights, up the indigenous communities, stuff like that. But those same people will be like, okay, but I don't want to stand and be like, it's a thing where like, I'm concerned about people who say they're like Bernie bros. Like, I get like their like perspective, because I really respect, like I agree a lot with what Bernie says. But the people who are like, they're still allocating their trust in a person who's straight white male, and they're like uplifting that, and it's less them uplifting the values. And so I think our community wants to be like, I want to uplift those, but someone who's in those communities and who can maybe speak on it more effectively and actually represents them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the powerful piece is also knowing when to be a part of the community and know when not to speak for the community, but to speak in defense of the community. I think there's some fine lines, but I think your generation is going to get there.
Yeah.
You are going to have differences. There are going to be people that are always going to feel one way, left or right, or in the middle. But I think as a nation, we're getting closer and closer to a more let's look at this instead of let's judge this society. It's going to take, again, 4 to 5 more generations before we get there. But each generation does something else that uplifts again for another piece.
That's all we have for today. Before you go, do you have anything you'd like to plug or suggest for those watching, or like maybe donate link or whatever?
Sure. I mean, I've worked for some really amazing organizations. I currently work for the Hetrick Martin Institute. You can go to hmi.org. Look at the work that we do. It's a wraparound community center. We are the nation's largest and oldest youth serving organization. We definitely accept donations, especially in this time.
Yeah.
And, you know, for anybody else that is looking for additional questions or are looking for spaces to become better allies, always visit us. Right now we are closed due to COVID, but once our doors reopen, we're located at 2 Astor Place on the 3rd floor. And we have great programming from 4 to 7:30 every day. Monday through Saturday. So please check us out. Again, that's www.hmi.org. And look at our sister organization, our sister school, really, the Harvey Milk High School. And that would be found on the Department of Education website.
For sure. I'll look up both of those links.
Okay.
I'll put them in, if this is YouTube, I'll put in the description or website. I'll have them as like a source or something that I'll like link to it. So they'll for sure be available if you need them, a directory for them.
All right.
That's all we have for today. Thank you. We've been You for Pride. I've been Joseph Hines, and thank you for watching. Bye.